today by Callum in the chat room. But before we move on to our guest speaker, we'll just go through some important messages. Next slide, please. So basically, the where we plan to run the event today. If you are speaking during the session, could you please put your cameras on just to know that we're not alone? Could you please mute during the session so to cut down on feedback? We will be running a short Q&A session or plenary session at the end of the presentation, but please feel free to enter your questions for the speaker onto the chat room. Callum will monitor those. And please contribute any thoughts, questions, suggestions into the chat room. We will be sharing this recording on our Futures platform after the session, so please use that as an opportunity to share widely amongst your organisations if you can. Okay, next slide. So I've really been looking forward to this one because it gives me great pleasure to welcome my friend and colleague, Pete Gordon, who is our Head of Emergency Care Improvement at ECIST. And this plans to be quite an interesting session. Thank you, Pete, for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. And hello, everybody. So, yeah, my name's Pete Gordon. I'm Head of Emergency Care Improvement with ECIST, Emergency Care Improvement Support Team. Got a background in nursing many years ago, operational management and improvement. And I've been asked to talk today about how do you get stuff in the hands of the many? How do you create social movement? So I've got a wide variety of slides and hopefully we can have a discussion at the end. First thing I'd start off with is this phrase, and this is a phrase I love. It's by Grace Hopper, who was a Rear Admiral in the American Navy many years ago, when it wasn't a job deemed, appropriate for women. And the phrase that she used, that the Institute for Healthcare Improvement also used, the most dangerous phrase in language is, we've always done it this way. So when you're thinking about your changes and your improvement and you hear people say, but we've always done it this way, that's always a warning sign. And the bottom line is a lot of change initiatives don't work. So we need to think about that. And, the Dakota Indians, their tribal wisdom says, when you discover that you are riding a dead horse, the best strategy to do is to dismount. But in the NHS, we tend to do something slightly different. We often, let's buy a stronger whip. Let's threaten the rider with a sack. Let's get a new rider. Let's set up and appointing a committee to study the dead horses. Let's arrange a visit to another site that has dead horses. Let's lower the standards so that dead horses can be included. Let's hire some outside contractors to ride the dead horse. Or I don't know, let's fasten 3 dead horses together. But sometimes when you're discovering that you're riding a dead horse, you need to change. The best thing to do is to stop and dismount. And a big thing for me, and a big part of this session, if we want people to take action and do stuff, we need to connect with their hearts as well as their minds. And often what we do is we often start with what. And I'm going to suggest that actually we should start with why. And let me explain that. So this is something called the Golden Circle by a famous American improver called Simon Sinek. And he talks about that if you start with why, then how and what, which are important, you have greater influence if you start with why. And let me explain that in a bit more detail. But when we're thinking about the why, when we're thinking about your shared sense of purpose, these are the questions. What is your purpose? And I'm not talking about targets or cost improvement programs. I'm talking what genuinely is your cause? What is your belief? Why does your organisation exist? Why do you go to work? Why do you get out of bed in the morning? What's the thing? And it can feel a bit fuzzy, but what is genuinely your shared sense of purpose? And I'll give you a few practical examples. So many of you will have a phone. I have a phone here. It's an Apple phone. And Apple outperform their competitors, such as Hewlett-Packard and Dell, by millions of pounds every year. But they do something very different. They don't say we've got a really strong, really clever computer. What they say is this: everything we do, we believe in challenging the status quo. We believe in thinking differently. The way we challenge the status quo is by making our products beautifully designed, simple to use and user-friendly. We happen to make great computers. Do you want to buy one? That's their purpose. Let me give you another example. You may think this is extreme, but this is Martin Luther King, a very famous leader who stood on the podium in Washington in the 1960s. He didn't say these 5 words. He didn't go, I have a project plan, when he's trying to motivate that huge gathering of people who'd all come there to join in the movement. What did he say? He said 4 words, didn't he? He said, I have a dream. And that works. And I'm not saying you go back to your organizations and you start going out, I have a dream, but it's an example of how you build a social movement. So for me, for example, this stirs my mind and it stirs my heart. So there's some facts. 48% of people over the age of 85 died within 1 year of hospital admission. Wow, that doesn't bode well in my mind. But then I love this by my mate, Professor Brian Dolan. Patients' time is the most important currency in health and social care. And when he was working in New Zealand with a big group of multidisciplinary team, geriatricians, AHPs and nurses, he came up with he coined the phrase, if you had 1,000 days left to live, how many of those would you choose to spend in hospital? And that's more in the heart space. So you need the mind and you need the heart. And I love this tweet by the chief executive of Northampton and Kettering, Simon Weldon, when you're thinking about the importance of time and our purpose. And I think about my purpose in ECIST and Mark's purpose, who's sitting right next to me in ECIST, is what can we do to save patients time? The feedback from the relative of a patient that talks to the importance of time. When you have a life-limiting illness, each moment becomes precious. Waiting a minute feels like 10. Waiting 10 minutes feels like half an hour. Waiting half an hour feels like an eternity. That's more in the heart space. So when we're thinking about social movement and creating that energy, there's 6 characteristics. There's a shared sense of purpose, which is the why. People are united. You know those jobs where you've got a sense of purpose, you're united as a team, there's a shared understanding, people participate, they actively take action and they take initiative. And they're the characteristics. What I'm going to do now is play you a video. It's quite humorous and it's about a social movement and how it starts. And what I'd ask you to watch out for is the importance. We always look for charismatic, dynamic leaders, but look out for the importance of the first follower. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that in a minute. So here's the video.
So ladies and gentlemen, at TED, we talk a lot about leadership and how to make a movement. So let's watch a movement happen, start to finish, in under 3 minutes and dissect some lessons from it. First, of course, you know, a leader needs the guts to stand out and be ridiculed. But what he's doing is so easy to follow. So here's his first follower with a crucial role. He's going to show everyone else how to follow. Now notice that the leader embraces him as an equal. So now it's not about the leader anymore, it's about them, plural. Now there he is calling to his friends. Now if you notice that the first follower is actually an underestimated form of leadership in itself. It takes guts to stand out like that. The first follower is what transforms a lone nut into a leader. And here comes a second follower. Now it's not a lone nut, it's not 2 nuts, 3 is a crowd, and the crowd is news. So a movement must be public. It's important to show not just the leader, but the followers, because you find that new followers emulate the followers, not the leader. Now here come 2 more people, and immediately after, 3 more people. Now we've got momentum. This is the tipping point. Now we've got a movement. So notice that as more people join in, it's less risky. So those that were sitting on the fence before now have no reason not to. They won't stand out, they won't be ridiculed, but they will be part of the in crowd if they hurry. So over the next minute, you'll see all of the those that prefer to stick with the crowd, because eventually they would be ridiculed for not joining in. And that's how you make a movement. But let's recap some lessons from this. So first, if you are the type, like the shirtless dancing guy, that is standing alone, remember the importance of nurturing your first few followers as equals. So it's clearly about the movement, not you. Okay, but we might have missed the real lesson here. The biggest lesson, if you noticed, did you catch it? Is that leadership is over-glorified. That yes, it was the shirtless guy was first, and he'll get all the credit, but it was really the first follower that transformed the lone nut into a leader. So as we're told that we should all be leaders, that would be really ineffective. If you really care about starting a movement, have the courage to follow and show others how to follow. And when you find a lone nut doing something great, have the guts to be the first one to stand up and join in. And what a perfect place to do that at TED. Thanks.
So a fascinating video, you know, very humorous. Thank you, Matt Hardwick, for texting me the comment. Is that in the Aston Villa ground in Birmingham? No, it's not. Here's a couple of examples of social movements which you may be able to relate to. So here's Dr. Kate Granger, who is now passed away a number of years ago, geriatrician. And when she was experiencing her care, what she noticed is people didn't introduce herself. She went home to her husband, Chris, who you might say is the first follower. And he said to her, you know, if you're going to keep talking about this, why don't we do something about it? And that evening they set up the Hello, My Name Is campaign. It's a really good example of keeping it really simple and a social movement. Another one which myself and a number of ECIST colleagues have been very involved with Professor Brian Dolan is the power of NPJ paralysis, trying to get people up, dressed and moving. How much money did it cost? How did it start? It didn't cost any money. It started with one tweet, 4 people, Brian, who's probably maybe the lone nut, and 3 followers, Anne-Marie Riley, who's the chief nurse for UH&M in Stoke, my colleague Tim Gillett and myself. And we just said, let's give it a go. No project plan, let's just go, because it feels like it's doing the right thing. So there are a couple of examples. And when you take, I don't know, companies like Timson, I love this. We prefer initiative to process and shop visits to meetings. We like working hard and having fun. We don't have secrets and we don't do politics. We like lots of ideas and very low overheads. We keep it simple and we do it straight away, which is a great thing for a company to say. And one thing that we say in ECIST a lot, and it's a big mantra of mine, is, you know, when you're trying to get stuff in the hands of the many, if you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it well enough. You know, that HCA, that ward manager, who could be my wife's ward manager, you know, when I say stuff to her, she goes, that doesn't make any sense to normal people, Pete. So you've got to keep it simple. But what I would say is this, is human beings, and in the NHS, we do it quite a lot. We have a tendency to do silly stuff and we follow like sheep. And for me, I feel some rules are there to be broken. I'm not suggesting we break the law, but human beings do some silly stuff. And I'm going to just play you a video now. And I'm going to ask you, would you do what these people are doing? So here we go.
To answer that question, we set up a hidden camera experiment to see if this woman would stand up at the sound of this tone, simply because everyone else is. You might be thinking you'd never go along with this. Or would you? After just 3 beeps, and without knowing why she's doing it, this woman is now conforming perfectly to the group. But what happens if we take the group away?
Elaine, please.
Okay, now she's alone. The crowd is gone and nobody is watching her except our hidden cameras. What do you think she'll do? She's now conforming to the rules of the group without them even being there. Now, watch what happens when we introduce another outsider who doesn't know the rules.
Have a seat and they'll be out in just a couple minutes. Great. Thanks so much. Everybody was doing it, so I thought I was supposed to.
Think she'll teach the new guy what to do? We kept the cameras rolling as more unsuspecting patients arrived. And slowly but surely, what began as a random rule for this woman has now become the social norm for everyone in this waiting room. Here to explain what's going on in their brains is Jonah Berger of the University of Pennsylvania.
This sort of internalized form of herd behavior is part of what we call social learning. Starting at a very early age, when we see members of our group perform a task, our brains literally reward us for following in their footsteps.
When I saw everybody stand up, I felt like I needed to join them. Otherwise, I'm like excluded. Once I decided to go with it, then I felt much more comfortable.
Conformity is how we become socialized, but it can also cause us to develop bad habits or repeat past wrongs.
And it's why even this rebel, who wasn't standing for any of this nonsense, eventually joined the ranks. And the only thing more shocking than seeing how easily conformity affects the way you act is that similar forces are subconsciously shaping the way you think.
So it's a fascinating video. One thing I'd say to you is everyone would say, oh, I wouldn't do that. When you go back to work, think about one silly rule that you think just needs stopping. Just give it a bit of thought. We all do lots of silly things. Now, when we're trying to think about getting change in the hands of the many, one thing I'd ask you to do is think about who are your 3% in the organisation or the system you're trying to influence. Because the evidence suggests that 3% of people in the organisation or the system influence 85% of the other people. And this is the really interesting part of it, is most of the 3% are not the formal leaders. So not the chief operating officer or the chief executive. The formal leaders typically make up 12% of an organisation and drive conversation with 55% of the other people. So when you're thinking about getting stuff in the hands of the many, think about who are your 3%. These are the people who will really, you know, if you get them on board, your chances of success are much bigger. And then when we're thinking about, you know, what kind of activists are the most successful at delivering change? So we've got lone wolves. They build power by expertise and information through advocacy, oversight, contributing to committees and public comments and other forms of consultation, but they are lone wolves. Mobilizers, who build people by mobilizing people, we have to call on large numbers of people to contribute, or organizers, you know, building power by growing leaders, identifying, recruiting and training future leaders. Of these, who are the most successful at delivering change? Well, it's the mobilizers and the organizations, and preferably a combination of both. The least effective, and we can all think of those people, those lone wolves, these are the people who are least effective. So it's your mobilizers and your organizers that you should be targeting. And then also when you're thinking about, you know, when you're trying to create movement and change, here's a technique which is really handy, and it's called going for no. And it's a really simple technique. I use it a lot. And it's basically based on some evidence from sales. So in sales, 2% of sales are made on the first contact, 3% are made on the second contact. But once you get above the 5th to 12th contact, you're 80% more likely to make a sell. And if you use that in your conversation, that's not like just being really aggressive about it, but someone goes, if I say, oh, Mark, here's an idea, he goes, oh, I'm not too sure about that. I go, okay, but what about if it's a bit like this? And I get past the 5th no, your chances of success increase. So when you're thinking about creating movement, getting stuff in the hands of the many, expect lots of people to say no, but have in your back of your mind that you're going to go for no. Don't be put off by that no. See if you can get past number 6, number 7. And then also is we do like to, in the NHS, sort of think a bit like firefighters. And I know everyone's on the high levels of alert, and, you know, there's a part of it which needs that. But, you know, if you only ever concentrate on the urgent and not the important, you won't get change. And I'd advocate thinking a bit more like a farmer than a firefighter. And why is that? Because maybe that sounds a bit wacky or a bit weird. Well, farmers don't shout at the crops. They don't blame the crops for not growing fast enough. They don't pull the crops up before they've had a chance to grow. They choose the best plants, the processes people for the soil. They irrigate and they fertilize. They remove weeds, those constraints, and they realize outcomes are not predictable. They also realize that sacking the farmer really probably won't help the crops grow. So maybe another top tip, thinking like a farmer. And then also, some of you may have heard of the work by the brilliant Dr. Chris Turner, an ED consultant from UHCW, Coventry in the West Midlands. And his work on incivility is startling. So, you know, when you're trying to do stuff and, you know, move stuff forward. If you work in an environment which lacks civility, these are the staggering results. 80% of people lose time worrying about it. 48% reduce their time at work. 25% take it out on customers and patients, and 12% leave. And we can probably all think of, can't we, of examples of places we work where civility isn't the norm, and what happens, all these devastating results, and look at the effect on patients. And when Google did years of intensive analysis, it was called Project Aristotle, and they spent a lot of money doing this analysis. What they found was the key to great teamwork, and you need great teamwork to, you know, deliver change and really get some momentum going. It was really simple. It was being nice, and it cost nothing. And you know, this is by James Timpson, who's the guy who runs Timpson, which is a very successful business. You know, his very simple mantra, one of his shared sense of purpose: no one is more important than anyone else. And when you find environments where people are definitely more important, I always think, I'm not too sure about that. And one of the things I think I'd probably encourage is probably developing a level of self-efficacy. And let me explain what that is. That's not arrogance. It's about the perception of one's ability to perform a task successfully. So, famous quote by Henry Ford: if you think you can, or you think you can't, you're probably right. You're probably right. So when you're thinking about a change, a belief in it, not an arrogant belief, is your chances of success are higher. And whatever you're meant to do or you want to do it now, because do you know what? The conditions are always impossible. It's summer holiday, people are off, we've got capacity. Oh, then it's the winter. And whatever you're going to do, try this, try the 2 levels down rule. So if you think, what can I achieve in a year? If you think your idea will take a year to test and implement, consider what you could achieve in a month. If you think it will take a week, consider what you could achieve in an hour. And this comes from a very famous Paul Plesek, is a Canadian improver, and I learned this a number of years ago, and it really does work. So the 2 levels down rule. And you know, perfection is the enemy of getting things done. Perfection is the enemy of good. And if you think about this set of stairs in front of you, take the first step, but don't aim for perfection. If you overplan, overthink things, it's probably less likely to succeed. And then, you know, I love this tweet by Simon Sinek: a small team committed to a cause bigger than themselves can achieve absolutely anything. And, you know, there are lots of rules which are there to be broken. And, you know, I'm not saying break the law or be unsafe, but there are a lot of rules. If you said, well, what's our purpose? Our purpose is around really saving patients' time, really valuing it. These silly rules over here help our shared sense of purpose. So break the rules, not the law. And you know what? Sometimes in the NHS, we persecute people for making mistakes. Everybody makes mistakes. The best organisations learn from them. If you make a few mistakes along the way, you know what? Put your hands up and just go, I made a few mistakes. Okay, no problem. What did we learn from that? So that's my talk over. I'll just finish by saying is, you know, start with why, then how and what. Because remember, people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. Over to you, Mark.